Holy jumping. Did I ever learn a lot today with our guest, Karin Haumann from Shell Rotella. And we're talking about engine lubricants, and I knew nothing. It's a great interview. You've got to join us. Karin is next.
Welcome to the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast.
Hey, welcome back to the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast, where our guest today is Karin Haumann, and she is all going to talk to us about lubrication. Now, what could we possibly need to lubricate when it comes to the trucking industry other than our minds? Well, we're going to talk about essential lubrication that you need to keep your engine going. Karin, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Cool.
This is going to be kind of fun because I know nothing about oils and stuff like that. Johnny's got some experience, but Karin, can you first introduce yourself? Who do you work for, and what's your background?
Sure. I am the OEM Technical Manager for Shell Rotella, and I have been with Shell for about 12 years, and I work to support our technology department and R&D and communicate with customers and truck OEMs and basically act as a product application specialist to make sure that everybody is selecting the right products for their hardware.
And you also come on to podcasts.
I do.
Cool. Do you get involved with the testing, when it comes to lubricants and oils and whatnot for different environments?
I do. I'm pretty heavily involved both with Rotella internally in our product and development, research and development in the testing, and also at the industry level, at the API service category level. I'm the chair of the new category development team. That's one thing that's exciting now going on, is where the industry is upgrading the minimum standard, and I'm very heavily involved in that process.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
What do you mean by upgrading the standard?
So your oil recommendation that you get from your engine manufacturer is going to say API CK4. That's the current standard. And that's just the specification. It's the minimum performance standards that they require for an oil that they recommend that you use in your engine.
Okay, see? Yeah, I'm going to ask a bunch of these stupid questions because I really don't understand anything about it. But some of our guests may be the same as me. But anyways, Johnny, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, let's educate our listeners a little bit here, because I know there's a lot of people that they hear a lot about this synthetic, full synthetic, semi-synthetic. What's the difference between synthetic and the regular oil we are just used to using?
Synthetic oil is it's the base oils that we use. They're more highly refined, and they have better protection, better properties at extreme temperatures, both in the cold and the hot. So everybody knows that your oil changes viscosity with the temperature. When it heats up, it gets thinner. When it's cold, it gets thick. So synthetic base oils are more temperature stable across a range of temperatures. So it allows us to have more of a consistent environment for the oil to operate in, and offers higher protection.
Okay. So obviously that's going to be a big plus come cold startup and stuff along that line.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the oil, your viscosity grade, you've got the two numbers, the XW and then the, a 15W40. Well, the first number tells you it's the winter number, and tells you how pumpable it is at cold temperatures, is really how that's defined. So when you're cold and in the winter, you want to have the lowest number on that first number, 5W, 0W. Then
Right.
the oil is more pumpable when it's cold.
Right. Okay. I was going to say, because that's something that I use I have a diesel engine in my Jeep, and I use either the 0W or the 5W in my little diesel engine, which I know makes it a lot easier to pump and get that thing to start in the mornings.
Yep, it's a lot easier on your starter and your battery, and your critical parts get lubricated faster. Just better all around.
How does it affect the trucks? A lot of my customers, excuse me, are located up here in the north, but they do Californias or they run to Texas. How does that affect things when the truck leaves the north and gets down into the warmer, sunnier, I hope, climates? If you've got a 0 or a 5 viscosity, I can't even say the
Well,
damn word.
that's where the second number comes in. So a 0W40 offers you protection at the widest range of temperatures. The
Oh,
higher that second number is, the more viscosity control we have at high temperatures. So if you're running north to south, hot to cold consistently, you want to have that widest range of temperature protection would be a 0W40.
okay. Can you say that one more time? Because I think that's really important. If you're running from the cold temperatures to the warm temperatures, what's the range of numbers you'd like to see?
So the first number is the cold temperature, the lower the better for cold. And the second number is hot temperature, the higher the better. So the wider the range of those numbers, 0W40 is the widest range, will cover both ends of the spectrum.
And
And it requires synthetic base oils to be able to accomplish both sides of the spectrum at the same time, which is where your synthetic comes in.
Right.
so they're better off running synthetic than typical oil. There.
That's right.
Okay. See, I'm learning. Well,
There'll be a quiz at the end.
I was going to say one way that might really help you, Chris, is if we took and at minus 20 outside, and we got a Mr. Turtle pool with the 040 in it, right? And then if we took another Mr. Turtle pool and we put like 15 W40 in it, and then we let you swim in each one of the baths of oil, and you could tell us which is slipperier and easier to move around in.
there. Yep. I'm not going outside of this time of the year. So. And
I'm sure your wife.
I want to comment on that too. You would be able to swim through the 0W40 faster, which is why it gives you better fuel economy.
There you go. There you go. And your wife would probably come up with a smart ass comment for you, Chris.
I was just thinking our listeners and viewers really don't want to see me in a bathing suit at all. So, nor do they want to see me covered in oil. Anyway. So, is it necessary? Why would I run 040 all year round, or is it necessary to better for the engine to be switching? Sorry, you're shaking your head. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you can run it year round. There's no detrimental effect. It's just offering you protection at those extreme temperatures when they occur, and everything in between. So you can run that year round, no problem.
Cool.
Okay, because of course up here, you being formerly from Cleveland, summers can get very hot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Cool. I was going to say an interesting fact. So, and maybe you can help me to understand this. So, I have a classic car, 1975 Buick, gas engine, and I have been informed long time ago to use a heavyweight diesel style oil in it. Because of the old style lifters that are in it and the old technology that's in it. So I run Shell Rotella T1540 in that thing. It doesn't run in the wintertime, obviously, but I'm told I get better protection by utilizing that grade of oil. Why would that be?
So over the years, the engineers and the car manufacturers, engine manufacturers have done a very good job of engineering out a wear problem. We have more parts that roll instead of slide. And if you've got a 1975 old valve train, it's probably a flat tappet, lots of sliding parts.
Mm-hmm.
So also over the last decades, we have refined and optimized our engine oils and the additive systems that have kind of grown with the new technologies. And while they are backward compatible, we always make sure that when we upgrade the standard that we go to great lengths to make sure it's backward compatible. You have more protection with a more we call it heavily additized. It's just got better anti-wear, more heavy-duty anti-wear protection for that older style hardware that isn't designed, as well to prevent wear.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
And does that
Absolutely.
I was going to say, this is good. Yeah, it's good to know, because I was going to say, I think there's a lot of people out there with classic cars that go, well, oil's oil, and I've always kind of said, it's not. It has its purposes, its applications, and, you need to do a little bit of research on it as to where you should use what oils where.
That's right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Would you say the same thing for trucks? I mean, we know that there's a lot of trucks running right now that are older than 2000 because they don't want to go ELD. What considerations for lubrication should those trucks be making, or those owners be making?
So those trucks will already have, obviously, a heavy-duty diesel engine specification or recommendation. And we always recommend that you look to your service manual to see what viscosity grade that you should be running. So typically the service manuals will have a kind of a mapped out range of temperatures. If your ambient temperature is between this and this, you need to use 15 W40. And so it gives you a selection based on your operating conditions. And those will also be in the older manuals. And so we recommend that you follow that, because that recommendation was designed at the time that hardware was developed. And so that's going to best match the design of the hardware you have.
See? Dan, I hope all the people that are running the older trucks listen.
Yeah.
Read your owner's manual, and I'm sure most owner manuals. Well, no, I mean, damn, I drive a newer car, and I've never read the owner's manual. I mean, who does?
Well, and I was going to say, it's also important for, like, if for a fleet, that if you've got your own mechanic shop and whatnot, that you understand what lubricants are required for which vehicle and stuff like that. So if you're running some older trucks and with a mix of newer equipment, maybe one oil is not going to be the answer. Maybe you need a couple of different viscosities there for the older trucks and the newer trucks.
Yeah, I know that's always a sticking point with adding complexity, having more than one oil. If you've got multiple trucks, and there's scenarios where you can use kind of the least common denominator, but you want to make sure that you're picking the right one. If you're going to, if you're going to err on one side, you want to make sure that you're picking the right oil based on your hardware. So it's always good to understand. There's other things like. It could affect your oil pressure because of the viscosity. So depending on the way the oil pump was designed, your older 25, 30-year-old engine may need a thicker oil to maintain that pressure. That's why we recommend that you use utilize the owner's manual. I know nobody reads it, but I mean, and sometimes, over the years, the engine manufacturers can update, because oils increased in quality over time. So do some research, and maybe the engine original equipment manufacturer has kind of done a backward compatible recommendation that, when your truck was manufactured in 1995, we said use this, but now you can use, Y instead.
Well, I was going to say, that's where it's good for your maintenance team to be in conversation with those engine and vehicle manufacturers on a routine basis, to get those updates and know what they can and cannot use, or what they should and shouldn't be using.
Yep, that's right. That's exactly right. And that's what we do at Shell. That's my job, is to help make sure that our customers are clear on what should I be using. This is my situation. This is where I'm at. This is my hardware. What oil do I use?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, well, so I was just going to say, because a lot of companies are going to have an oil supplier, because they'll probably be buying their oil in bulk. So, if you've got a mix of manufacturers in your fleet, then hey, talk to your suppliers with your lubricants and oils. They'll be able to also help you to understand which you should be using for which vehicles, or knowing that, oh no, this one will do everything. You'll be okay with this. So,
that's right.
Having those conversations is going to be key.
Yeah, that's right. We can help you if you have to have one oil for everything. We can help you find that kind of least common denominator and help you understand what you're gaining and what you're losing by doing that.
Right.
Fuel economy obviously is top of mind now, and the thinner the oil, the better the fuel economy. And if that's the end all be all, then we'll kind of go over what the pros and cons are and help you decide what's best for your particular situation.
Sure.
Can you answer a question? Because I really don't know how to say it, but what's the difference between synthetic oil and oil? And whether it applies to cars or trucks. You're more in trucks, I would believe, but what is there an advantage, I guess, to using synthetic?
So synthetic oil just means that the base oil, so oil consists of the base oil, the hydrocarbon, plus chemistry that helps with anti-wear, anti-oxidation, and all of the additive chemistry. So, you're probably about 75% of the oil is base oil. And when we say synthetic oil, we're talking about oils that are more base oils that are more highly refined. And so, the molecules are more uniformly shaped is why it performs better. And I've got a really good visual. I don't have it here. I wish I could. I wish I had it here. But if you imagine a picture of pile of ball bearings, and a picture of the same pile of gravel, you could say the gravel represents the conventional oil and the ball bearings represent the synthetic oil. So you can kind of think of that. That's what I mean when I say more highly refined.
And,
so it just performs better.
And that's a great visual. And it also answers, in my mind at least, a second question as to why synthetic is often priced higher. And you've answered that because it's more refined. You've put more work into it to make those molecules all the same size so that it works better in the engine.
That's right. And we just have more control with the chemistry over something that's more uniformly shaped molecularly. And I'm not a chemist, and so I got to make sure I stay in my lane. I'm a mechanical engineer, so I have to be careful. I can give you my dumb mechanical engineer explanation for how these things work, but there is a chemical, component to it that we have smart people that.
No, I liked your visual of the ball bearings and the rocks. I understood that.
Yeah, that's my mechanical engineer's version of how they're different chemically, because I'm not a chemist.
I like that.
It was visual and it was simple enough for me to understand, which, hopefully the rest of the audience is a lot smarter than me. And,
I got it. It was good. Yep, I followed you, Chris. I thought it was good. So yeah. So why are we seeing continuous evolvement in oil specifications? Why isn't it just, manufacturers, here's your oil, live with it, deal with it, move on?
Well, that's primarily driven by federal regulations and pressures that the engine manufacturers have on reducing emission requirements. And so we at Shell work very closely with the big engine manufacturers, and we kind of co-develop the oil and the new engine hardware at the same time. So they're having to do different hardware designs in order to accomplish these emission reductions. And that requires performance changes of the oil. So for example, if they want to, and this is just a very generic example I'm just coming up with, if they want to lower the viscosity to get better fuel economy, then they could perhaps heat the oil up and make the operating temperature of the oil, because we know that as oil gets hotter, it gets thinner. So they can control the viscosity with temperature, and they can say, hey, I want to crank up my operating temperature by 10 degrees. Well, if you do that to the oil oxidizes and gets thick based on time and temperature. So they may come to us and say, can you give me something that's more oxidatively stable to allow me to increase my temperatures? Or they may say, can you give me something that's more oxidatively stable so that I can offer my customer longer oil drain intervals? So we work with them to facilitate the changes that they need to make to accomplish their goals by increasing the performance of the oil.
And
Interesting.
that's the one thing I've noticed a lot is oil changes have gotten many more miles or kilometers in between changes over the years. And that talks to what you were just saying, doesn't it?
That's a function of two things: engine design and oil quality. So an engine manufacturer can design their engine to be a little less harsh on the oil, and we as oil suppliers can use our chemistry and our things that we're doing for improvements to make oil last longer in a harsh environment.
See, well, I'm learning so much today, but and I'm being a little silly about it, but this is all stuff that I've had no idea about, and I'm old. This has been great.
Yeah.
What else, Karin, what else did we need to discuss about Shell Rotella?
Well, we've got a great line of synthetic blend and full synthetic products, our Rotella T5 and T6. You're talking about being up north and having a wide range of operating conditions with respect to temperature. So we've got full synthetic 10W30s and full synthetic T6 1540 if you want the full synthetic, but you still want or need that higher viscosity grade. So that's kind of the best of both worlds. We've got the Rotella T6 5W40 and 0W40 also. So there's something for every condition out there in the Rotella line for sure.
Well, and I believe Shell makes oils for other than just engine usage as well, gear oils, other types of lubricants, greases, and stuff like that as well. Do they not?
Yep, absolutely. Coolants, greases. I'm not, that's not in my wheelhouse, so I don't really know, all the details on that stuff. But yeah, totally, all of our fluids that cover the gamut.
So pretty much that truck, any truck could be fully outfitted with Shell oils and lubricants of any sort.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what does the future hold for Shell? One of the things that I drive an electric vehicle, and I know there's lubricants in an electric vehicle, there's coolants in an electric vehicle, but there's not as many changes of those fluids. How is that going to affect Shell in the future? If, just take a shot at it. I'm sure this isn't where your home, where you work, but it's just an interesting, as we electrify some of our vehicles, it could be a change, I would imagine.
That's true. There are different technical requirements. Electric vehicles still need fluids. They still need some lubrication, greases, and those types of things. And so Shell is working to evolve our technology to meet those needs. And you're right, it's going to look a lot different 50 years from now than it did 50 years ago. And we're we're evolving in that space and providing, we call them e-fluids. We have a full line and, an R&D group that's working on the fluid needs of electric vehicles as they become more prominent. Definitely.
Well, thanks.
So I
Last
would
word, Karin.
suggest that you go to the rotella.shell.com website. There is a whole team in the background that will guide you to the right product for your application and help answer questions. And if they get a question that they can't answer offhand, they'll bring me in or shoot it over to me and see if I could. But there's a wealth of information on product selection for your particular situation, and I would recommend that you start there.
And that website address is in the show notes down below.
Perfect.
So, Karin, last word. Anything else we need to know about Shell?
Well, I just want to say thanks for having me. It was great talking to you guys and talking about Rotella. It's an exciting time in the engine oil business. I know that sounds really corny. I guess that's where I am in my life. But there's lots of exciting changes coming up with the new category development, which will launch around this time in 2027. And so, we'll be out at the truck shows throughout the year and talking to people and answering questions and kind of bringing about what's coming new in the coming years, and what new products that we're launching. So, we look forward to seeing our customers in those spaces for sure.
Awesome.
I just imagine that with everything that's changing and all the pressures on the engine manufacturers and the truck manufacturers to reduce environment damage and increase fuel economy and everything else, engine lubrication has a huge part to play. So there has to be a lot of R&D going on in the background all the time.
Absolutely.
Karin is just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to engines and lubrication. I would encourage you to take a look at the rotella.shell.com website, and you can get your questions answered there. Thanks, Karin, for coming on the Trucking Risk and Insurance podcast. It was a great interview, and I'm sure you loved it too. If you've got the time and you appreciated it, give it a thumbs up, leave us a comment, tell us what you would like to hear on the podcast. Chris and Johnny, we're out. See you next week.